We are here with DeAnthony Miles and Robin Shedrick, who are going to share some of their research regarding the election. Robin, we've got an election coming up that is totally unlike any election we've had in our lifetime. We've not had a presidential candidate drop out because they look so bad during a debate and then replaced by another candidate that not only is a minority female candidate, but is a minority female candidate that didn't even win a primary. So
Mm.
there are so many moving parts in this election. The conversations I've had with DeAnthony up until now have been really telling because I know your group collects so much data that you
Mhm.
have access and insights that really not many groups out there have. So
Right.
tell us a little bit about your research and what is it saying regarding the election and what's going on right now?
Well, what's been so interesting is that we've been collecting this information, this data about elections for now going on about 5 years. So, we could not have in the beginning of the design have predicted that the data would be so just absolutely on point for the experiences that we have in this moment. So, we initially were looking at men and women across the country, a large sample size of about 1,700 people, mainly people that have bachelor's degrees, all walks of life. Majority of them tended to be liberal, but still a fair amount of moderates and conservatives are also represented in our population. And so, with all of that being said, we're looking at it. We presented at a couple of conferences, won awards for the data that we were collecting and our presentation of our analysis. But the women in the group started wondering, is there something different about the way women are looking at elections and candidates that is different? And maybe in this particular moment where we are, so polarized in this country for things that we really actually share in common. We all want a good life. We all want to have opportunity. We want to pay for our bills. We want to have good families. Like we all really have the same needs and desires, but somehow it's gotten real polarized. So we were wondering, looking at our population, it's a little bit more women than men. Do women look at their selection of candidates a little bit different? So when we started looking at this just with the women, it's a little over 750 women that were just represented in this data set, and we found that women really are looking at our candidates differently. Um, but at the same time, we want some of the same things that men want. We want people that have, credibility. We want candidates that say what they are going to do and actually do what they say. you know and so those were the kinds of findings that we had. We looked at a couple of predictive analysis, and we found that for women voters tend to be less concerned about the aesthetics of the candidate. We don't care if they have a good flip or if they have a really nice tie. We were really not that interested on those kinds of aesthetics, but we are interested in this big pool of the unknown. Are you affiliated with people that we trust? Were you in the military? Are you part of a big fraternal organization with people that have had experience with you, that they know that they can trust you and therefore I can trust you? Um, are you somebody that has the kind of morals and values that most American households have? And those are the things that women voters are looking at.
It's so interesting. The morals and values thing, I think, is probably the most interesting thing about recent political campaigns because if you look at the candidates, which candidate exactly has them? Because both political parties, no matter who the candidate is, it's like they have flaws, they have
Everybody.
character questions, they have
Mhm.
things they've done that make you wonder, are they real and really who they say they are? So,
Absolutely.
how do women voters kind of decipher that different from how male voters would?
Well, what it looked like to me in the data was that women were very sensitive to things that didn't pan out in terms of character. So when you think about nice people, we all like to be around nice people. They make us feel good. But if you are somebody that makes other people frightened or scared, or you make everybody feel less safe, they tended not to want to vote for those kinds of candidates. So it was really about the basic things. You can go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We have basic things. We need food, shelter, security, and we want to have a sense of identification and comfort in our life. A little bit of joy would be nice too. And so those candidates that spoke directly to those basic needs, those are the candidates that our female voters in the data were most likely to vote for.
Are female voters more likely to vote for a female than a male, or vice versa?
I would say, looking at the data, when you look at whether or not a candidate is female, they do have some more hurdles to overcome in terms of being a candidate that women would vote for. But those hurdles are overcome by things like your affiliation with a fraternity or sorority, because those are, you're getting rid of some of that unknown, like, oh my gosh, they're part of an organization full of people, they do community service, they care about scholarship and excellence, these are the things I value, I can possibly trust this person. Being in the military, again, same kind of thing. If you were affiliated with the military organization, even if you are female, it seemed to reduce some of those concerns about voting for a woman candidate as president, for instance. So there are a lot of aspects when you look at our current election that, as Kamala Harris shows up as a female, as a candidate, and we have our Donald Trump, who's a typical male that we're used to seeing and used to voting for, it
I don't know
looks
about
like,
typical.
well, I mean, in terms of being male, we haven't had a female
Right.
president yet. Um,
No.
but but from that perspective, the fact that she is affiliated with a sorority and they are big on community service and fellowship and brotherhood and trust and those kinds of things seems to be beneficial to her overall appeal to the voters.
Does she have more appeal because she's already been vice president for 3.5 years and she's not unknown on the national
Absolutely.
scene?
I would say that's one thing and when I look at the data as a whole, it seems like the when you take that big pool of unknown and you reduce it, the more known a person is, the more likely a voter is comfortable voting for them.
Right. DeAnthony, one of the
Yes.
things that you had turned me on in the management literature to was there is a stream of literature in management journals where female employees prefer to work for a male boss versus a female boss.
Yeah.
How would this, in this election, you're running for president and Kamala Harris would ultimately be, the boss of the nation.
Yes.
Would this be one of the hurdles that Robin said that they have to overcome about an aversion just to having a female boss?
I definitely see some relevance there. Some women just prefer male leadership, and she does have a pool of voters that are not on board with her, which is, you find that odd that a woman wouldn't vote for another woman and they prefer to vote for a man. One of the things that comes out in the data is when we talked last time, we talked about the visual attributes. Um, Gender is an attribute, you can't change it. You are who you are. And some people it's a deterrent and some people it's an advantage. Well, when we were collecting our data, we had no idea that she'd be in a front runner right now, after Biden stepped down. So, Robin and her research, as we're collecting data, we're finding that is a game changer now. The women that probably wouldn't vote for a woman probably are having second thoughts now. Maybe we're creating history. Maybe it's time for a change. Robin, you can jump in anytime.
Well, and I'm not so sure.
Yeah,
I mean, I love the data that is out there about voting, but honestly, we haven't had a whole lot of opportunity to vote for women presidents. So
Right.
I'm not
Well,
so sure with such a small sample size, we can determine whether or not women are more inclined or less inclined to vote for women candidates. There haven't been that many
Yes.
in our history. But I will say that it is important to have visibility as a leader. And I think in even in the workplace, when you look at the senior executives in the Fortune 50 or 25 companies out here, we still have a very much underrepresentation of women in those positions of executive leadership. So perhaps because they are less visible and therefore of known, it would make the likelihood of someone being comfortable with a female in a leadership role like that something that is questionable. But I'm not sure that that is about their ability to or interest in female leadership as much as it's just unknown.
and Robin,
Yes.
you mentioned that you've been collecting data for 5 years.
Mhm.
So going back to the last time we had a female candidate that was very close to being president was Hillary Clinton. And there's
Yes.
only one. That's the only
Yes.
other one.
Yes.
What is different in the data now versus 5 years ago when you started collecting data right after, and that was right around the time Hillary had lost the election, a little bit after.
Yeah.
What's changed between now and then that might be favorable or unfavorable to Kamala Harris?
Well, I think one big thing is Trump is no longer an unknown quantity.
Yeah.
We know how he operated in this highest position. And people come down on different sides on whether or not they think it was good or bad. But the reality is, regardless of how you see it, we know.
Yeah.
And because of that information, we now have information, hard information, to make a determination on whether or not we would like to see it again. And there are people who do. But there are a lot of people who really got a question mark for that return. And they're looking at Kamala Harris thinking, maybe it's worth giving her a shot.
DeAnthony, I think kind
Yes.
of following up with that, the big thing about this election, you have the first time you have two candidates that have a 4 year track record in the Oval Office to run on.
Right. Yes.
How much does that change things? Because I mean, it's not like, what Robin I think had a perfect point. We're not dealing with two unknown commodities.
Yes.
We're dealing with two people that have been in the Oval Office and have a track record. Does that overcome some of those aversions to being a female candidate?
Yes, and I think that's an excellent question, Randall. And one of the other issues that I think what gives Kamala Harris an advantage because she has a 4 year track record as being a VP. And I had said this a long time ago. We started doing the research. I said, if you want to get a woman president, she's going to have to probably be a VP first. And I didn't know it would come true as soon as it's happening now. Now, if you want to, I think she's also studied Hillary Clinton and study what not to do. She's more
Absolutely.
charismatic than Hillary Clinton. That's Hillary Clinton wasn't well liked, and she's
No.
probably a little bit more likable. Remember, we talked off camera about how bad Hillary Clinton was not liked by men and women. Kamala seems to vacillate better between the two than she did, Hillary Clinton.
Well,
People just
I
didn't like.
remember,
Go ahead,
remember,
Robin,
I was
please.
going to say, you remember in our data,
Yeah.
education was a negative predictor for women.
Oh wow, I forgot about that.
Right. So
Okay.
Hillary Clinton kind of operated in that space with her education being one of the things that she wore like her pantsuit.
Right.
Hmm.
Yes. Yes.
So you
Excellent
notice
point.
you don't hear a lot of conversation from Kamala Harris, who of course is well credentialed. You don't hear
Yes.
her talking about it though.
Robin, real quick, and Browno, that's a great question. Robin, do you think she's doing the things that Hillary Clinton should have done, or vice versa? She learned from the lessons of Hillary Clinton when she ran for office? Because I think that's what she's doing to me.
Well, I mean, hopefully human experience. We only learn two ways in period. We only learn two ways. We learn through personal experience or from the experiences of others, period. And so
Yes.
she would obviously want to gain every single piece of wisdom possible from the great career of Hillary Clinton, and also some of the stumbling blocks that she encountered during her presidential election. So, of course, making those adjustments makes her better. It's always like that though. When you break a barrier that existed before you showed up, whatever, however successful you are or are not, you literally laid the foundation for the next people that come behind you.
Interesting. Interesting. And also the visual attributes that she has. Remember, Hillary had something wrong with her health, and people saw that.
Yeah.
And she seems, and that was one of the visual attributes is health in our data, and she
Huge.
seems to circumvent that. Kamala Harris, and go ahead.
It doesn't seem to be bothering Donald Trump any because people are saying that his conversation and his responses seem a little feeble, although they seem to work very well as a negative for our President Biden. It
Yes.
doesn't so far, in what I can see, it doesn't seem to be moving anything for him.
Yeah, I think with Donald Trump, I think Robin, you had a great point. One thing I've noticed, and I've talked to this about with DeAnthony off camera, since he got shot, he's not the same person. He's not the same candidate. He doesn't have the same vigor. And you almost wonder if he's got PTSD from being shot, and who wouldn't, if we were all
I
within an
didn't
inch
pick
of
up on
dying,
that,
we
Randall.
probably all would have PTSD, but he
Wow.
does not seem the same to me. And when Kamala Harris took over as the candidate, she had an energy that we haven't seen in a while.
I definitely agree with you, Randall, on that. I was thinking through what you said about Donald Trump, and I'm wondering, there were, besides him being shot, there was also one other thing that's different, and that is he is no longer competing against President Biden. And so maybe the energy that he had was directly related to his belief that he would be victorious against someone that he was able to point out and perhaps cast some of their challenges in a way that made American voters concerned. I don't know if he feels that same kind of confidence right now for Vice President Harris because she's younger and she's got fresh ideas, seems to be connecting with Gen Zs, and we're looking at something that is literally evolving in real time. So these are all new dynamics that no one yet knows what they will be. So it makes it difficult to create and to mount a defense against it.
The new dynamics, Robin, and the new ideas you talked about, I think are a great point because she was Biden's vice president for the last 3.5 years. And Biden had a very high unfavorability rating, much higher than Kamala Harris. How has she been able to pivot and kind of divorce herself from the Biden policies that were so unfavorable? And by saying, okay, this is a new fresh start, because that is a really, really tough thing to do. Because you weren't dealing with someone that was moderately unfavorable or had a 51% unfavorability. It was like in the 70s, so that's a tough thing to overcome. But she seems to have done it thus far.
Yeah, it does look like she's done so. I think she's done so by not divorcing herself from President Biden. I think what she's done is highlighted the fact that the role that she played as vice president was to support him. And she was committed and dedicated as a partner for him. And I think the American voters look at that loyalty and say, that's a quality that I really can get behind. Now, I wonder what she would like to do because her loyalty to President Biden does not underlie the ideas that she has for her own administration. I think they're separate entities, and it's exciting to find out how they are different.
Right.
Interesting.
D'Anthony, I mean, because this is such an unusual election and we're dealing with so many different elements, you have a new candidate, coming in at the 11th hour, another candidate being shot. And then you have the two biggest issues that voters are saying over and over, it's inflation / the economy. And then it's security at the border. And those are the two biggest issues. So the thing I think is so interesting about this, in the latest poll, no matter which poll you read, it's within the margin of error. Whichever way it goes, it is within the margin of error.
Did that
So my
close on?
question is, with the two biggest issues being the two most favorable issues for Trump, why is Kamala Harris seemingly not only holding her own, but gaining ground and maybe even taking a slight lead in some polls?
Oh, Randall, when I think we talked about this the last time, she's younger, she has more energy, and those attributes that we had looked at in our data, she has all the positive attributes of a candidate. And because of that, people are taking a look at her and saying, you know what? She's younger. Maybe we need to listen to what she has to say. Maybe we need to hear about what's her idea for the border or immigration, those type of things, or inflation. And I'm still not clear on her policies, but I think when she took over for Biden, it was a big game changer. And it was a big game changer to the fact that now we got some new blood in there if you're a Democrat. So we got something to compete with. And let's be honest, Robin and Randall, Biden probably should not have run for that second term. He just did
No,
not have the
no.
vitality. Um, he was slurring words. He was calling people the wrong names. And to piggyback on Robin's point with what your question to her, when you take away a comedian's insult, at the audience, you take that person away that he can't insult, and you come up with somebody new. Well, that took steam out of his comments because he's going to have a field day on Biden. He can't do that with Kamala Harris. Now, I think, and I also believe he's a little worried. I think he doesn't seem as confident as he did before. Like he's ready to go for a debate. I think he's worried. I think she's a prosecutor. They know how to ask questions, right? They get into a debate, he's going to have to bring his A game. He just can't show up and make insults. He just can't use one-liners. And because of that, she brings a different energy. And I believe the other side is worried because of that. In the data, what we found with attributes, she has charisma. Surprisingly, she wasn't charismatic as a VP, but she's charismatic as a political forerunner for president. So she turned on her charm. Robin, you want to add
Which I
something?
think, well, I think that's such a good point that she wasn't charismatic as a VP, but that's not the job of a VP,
Of
right? The
course.
job of the
Yeah.
VP is to stand next to your boss and support them in
Yes.
being successful. And she did that. And then you will notice I think sometimes we confuse um, energy for effectiveness. Biden
Right.
lacked a little bit of energy. But when you look at, for instance, the record reduction in border crossings right now for a party that is not supposed to be interested in the borders, that is significant. But he went about it a little bit different. He had Kamala Harris go and build relationships in South America and create infrastructures that made it possible for the people of those countries to actually stay in place because they had opportunity and the possibility of prosperity at home. Now, that's not an immediate fix. So we didn't see an immediate reduction in border crossings. But as things have continued to improve, we can see the trend lines are going down, and that's significant. Now, that's not a something that you can hear as a one-liner on the news because it takes time to gather that data to look to see where those trends are heading, and we are just now at a point where we that can be reported. I think a lot of Biden's policies were like that. He did things that were more long-term, and
Yes.
they were not necessarily popular insofar as it's not a one liner that you can give at a press conference and everyone's going, ooh. They ended
Right.
up being plans that required time and consistency to see if they would work. And we have seen some improvements, but they just haven't happened overnight.
Interesting. That's an interesting
Oh,
observation.
one question regarding Kamala Harris that has come up over and over in the media. Every media outlet, whether it's liberal, conservative, and I've talked about this with Anthony, I'm one of those rare people. I watch all news outlets because we don't really have real news in America. We have perspectives. There's one
Oh
side and then
yeah.
there's the other, and then there's the truth, which is somewhere in the middle. And,
Oh
that's
yeah.
what the thing I want to find out is where is the truth? one criticism of her across the board is she's yet to take any questions from the media, any media,
Ooh,
even friendly media,
interesting.
even MSNBC
Oh wow.
has criticized her for not taking questions. How is this affecting her, and why does this not seem to be affecting poll numbers?
Well, the interesting thing is in the data is that when a female candidate is in a position where they have to be defensive, which of course you're going to have to be when you take questions from the media and reporters, it is a negative perception. So, what she has probably done, there are people who are doing analysis all the time. She's probably taken a look to see where her energy is most effective at getting out the true message for what it is that she would like her administration to look like. And she found that doing media interviews isn't the most effective way for her to reach the voters that are going to make the difference in this election.
So, what is the most effective way? Because that's a great point, Robin. Like, is it the TikTok she's been doing? Is it, because I'm kind of following a little bit of that.
Right. We'll
It's
see
the
the
social
young,
media stuff.
well, Gen Z is on TikTok, right? And so she's trying to our Generation Z. They are media natives. That means they grew up as little people
So
with some
interesting.
sort of technology in their hand. She's going right to where they are most comfortable, and she's speaking their language. And this is part of the energy of this campaign, and the way people are experiencing her is because she is coming to people. She's trying to meet them where they are, instead of making them move to her place of comfort. She's not trying to. She's getting out there in the trenches for, like I said, Gen Z. It's getting out in social media. She's going out and she's doing different speaking engagements. She's going to colleges. She's out here with the people who will be the new future leaders of America. And she's making her case for why her administration policies will make it possible for them to usher in a new America.
That is so interesting that is a deliberate strategy. I never realized that. But sooner or later, she is going to have to take questions, you would think.
Of course. But by
But the question
then,
is when, because it's been a month now,
well,
So it's
I think she'll do it when she has saturated enough spaces in America where people actually feel like they know who she is. Because, see, what happens with the media is the media tells us what something is and what it means. She wants to be able to navigate her own meaning and her own narrative based on the authentic intent, not the way, like you said, there's so many different kinds of media outlets. Everybody is telling a version of the truth. The question is, which one's true? The truth is always going to reside with the person who is actually the intended communicator, not the people who are on the third party interpreting it. So she's trying to be in a position where the real message gets out there, and then she'll come back to the media and let them do what they will naturally do.
that is so
Interesting.
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 So, DeAnthony, you mentioned this in last time we talked. You
Yes.
think the next debate, your prediction, it's going to be the most watched debate in history.
Yes, I do. Um, and I
You've
think the other
collected the
side is
data.
word. Yeah. If I could go back and redo our instrument, one of the things I'll probably do would probably ask, do you think this candidate is intelligent enough or confident enough to debate issues based on their knowledge? And that's probably a question we're going to ask for the next election. I mean,
Mhm.
because we didn't ask that question. And debates or is your showtime, that's the Super Bowl. And if you have a slip up, like what happened with Biden, your numbers are going to go in the tank. And because she's used to talking in front of people, she's a prosecutor. Lawyers are used to talking in front of people, debating their beliefs about, a defendant or whatever. I think he has something to worry about because the oratory skills are obviously well. He's not an oratory guy. He's been, he's a businessman, but he's might be in over his head dealing with somebody that's a prosecutor. Those are two different skill sets. And in a debate, she could bait him and then come blindside him with another counterattack, and he can make him look silly. I think I mean, Robin, what do you think? I'd love to hear your opinion on this.
I mean, yes, I think the real issue with Biden when he did the debate was less what he said based on the data. Our data says that the populace of American voters are all, when you put them all together, men and women, are more focused on the aesthetics of a candidate than they are their content and value position. So with that being said, that meant no matter what comes out of their mouth, we're just watching you with our eyes. Well, Biden didn't appear to be confident because one of the appearances of confidence is the ability to speak fluently without stuttering, right?
Yes.
So he has a stuttering challenge. And so what happened was Trump said some things, and Biden may not have been at his best. We could clearly see with our eyes. And he was as not able to manage the image that he was actually representing to the rest of America. So I think that's a significant thing, but that'll be different in the next debate because, again, it's not about content. It's about aesthetics. Trump is bombastic, and he is very persistent in the narrative that he wants to advance. And Kamala Harris has her own narrative. I think it's going to be very challenging for this debate because she has a very careful balancing act to do when women in positions of leadership, according to the data, get into attacks that relate back to people's person. It is definitely perceived to be negative among the electorate. So she will have to be careful to be unemotional and to deal specifically with facts in a way that still allows him the ability to preserve his dignity.
I think that's so interesting. You say that. If you go back to the 2016 campaign when Trump was campaigning against Hillary, at every Trump rally, there was lock her up chants.
But that was for a man.
And now it almost seems like 8 years later, it's a complete role reversal. It's Trump is the convicted felon. We need to lock him up. Nobody's above the law. Would she be better off just not even talking about that and just trying to straight debate policy?
Absolutely. She should not. And she likely will not, because she can just beat him on content. She really could. Because at the end of the day, he does not want to talk about policy. He does not. He does not want to talk about what he's apart from the really exciting things that generate energy within his base. He's not interested in talking about the things that don't resonate with his base. So he's very strategic in that regard, and she's trying to speak to a broader base than he is. So that's going to be really challenging to do in a way, because men and women according to the data, are perceived differently when it looks like they are attacking one another. So in America, we still have low tolerance for women that are overly assertive or perceived to be aggressive. We just don't have tolerance for it, whether we believe she is within her ability or right to do so or not. America doesn't like that right now, according to the data.
Yeah, for me personally, as kind of your classic moderate voter, one of the things that would attract me to a candidate is that they just talked about policy and stopped with all the attacks.
Yes.
I don't care about that. I mean, if you're voting for a person, it's really tough to find great people that want to do this. You know, the best people on earth. I mean, Mother Teresa never ran for president.
Right.
You know, I mean, that's not the type we get.
That's right.
You get the very ambitious people that are willing to do anything to get to the top, no matter who they are, or what party they're from, or what they look like, or what gender.
No, Randall, I think you're right. But when you think about it, we have never, well, I would say never, since Nixon. It's been a long time since we had somebody in office, or even wanting to get in office, who was a known violator of norms. Let's put it that way. So we have
alleged, right? Can't say
no. I said violator of norms. I don't mean anything related to crime. I'm not going to get into that. But I'm just
allegedly.
saying when we Yeah. When we think about norms, though, we think about civility. We think about the belief that it's okay for people to be different. We think about wanting to see our neighbor win just like we win. We think about the things that make us all American. I thought that's what made us American. So I think it's been such a whirlwind, but the way in which our sense of norms has degraded um, is
I
staggering when you look
forgot you're a
at it.
psychologist, right? You
Yes.
jumping all this on us. Okay. She's a psychologist, Randall. I give up.
Yeah, we're in
I'm a
trouble.
person. I study people. I love people. And so I used to be able to go in the grocery store and have a conversation with someone who was politically on the other side. And it was a nice civil conversation. We don't even have the ability right
No,
now
it's
because of, to have these conversations. And I feel it feels very
hate
odd.
filled.
And yeah, because what's wrong with talking to someone who thinks differently and learning something from them? I love that, but
Well,
it's
yeah,
so
no matter
difficult
what
to
side
do.
you're on, I don't want to hate half the country. I mean,
Right.
no. But I think it's really interesting when you pointed that out about Nixon and the violation of the norms. I think as Americans, we've been desensitized to that almost because if you look at like starting with Bill Clinton and the whole, Monica Lewinsky and Whitewater thing, and then George Bush with the weapons of mass destruction after him, there seems to be something that follows every president, that there
Sure.
is something morally objectionable about something they're
Oh,
doing.
absolutely, without question.
And
But the only difference is some when that happens, like even Clinton, not whether we can have our conversation on whether we thought he was authentic when he apologized. But see, our politicians used to apologize to us. They used to talk about a way to improve where they were, what they weren't going to do anymore, how they were going to make some changes. Like we have moved to a whole nother level where our politicians have the ability to exist in a space where they violate the value systems of the majority of the American population without apology. Like that's new.
Well, we also have social media too. Bill Clinton didn't have social media back then. Now we people engage on social media. They say exactly how they feel. Bill Clinton would have got crucified if we had social media back then. He would have gotten crucified. And I don't know if he would have prevailed in the election. But now we have Trump. He's getting on social media. And some people like, okay, I don't care about that. I'm worried about if he's going to be a good president. I don't care if he lacks morality. That is such a reversal from 20, 30 years ago. I mean,
Absolutely.
it's scary. I I don't care about your morals because we took our data, well, not low on the opinions of people. I don't
Mhm.
care about if you're a knowledgeable candidate. I don't care about your morals. I just worry about what you look like. And Trump
Absolutely.
is a handsome guy. I got to give it to him. He has charisma. His hair looks good. He looks presentable. How do you overcome that?
I mean, but remembering that in that data, when we teased out just the women don't see things the same way. Women are not
Right.
interested in the aesthetics. They want the content, they want the
Yes.
character, and they want the morality because probably these are mostly college age women between, I think, 30 and I think 40, 45 or something like that. But these are women that are raising families, so they're
Yes.
looking at their own children, their own households, and they're thinking, who would I want my children to look up to?
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
and
Data
you
doesn't lie.
mentioned women raising families. I think that's so interesting. One of the things DeAnthony and I have talked about that there is a study that shows that women on Tinder, the dating app, are way more
Mm.
superficial than men. They're
Are you
Mm.
way less likely to
serious?
swipe on men
Wow.
than men are on women.
Oh
And
wow.
it's so interesting that you say that in politics, it's the exact opposite, that women are less superficial than men. And so it's just, I don't know.
See, but you know what's so interesting about that? When I think psychologically about Tinder, attractiveness is also when you look at some of the studies related to physical health.
Hmm.
So if you are looking
Interesting.
for a mate and you're of childbearing years, you might not be swiping because you're not sure what your offspring might be. Will they be healthy? You know, how will that, if you decided to connect to this person and you guys went forward and got married, would this be a union that would produce healthy life? So you wonder what the things that make us that make us attractive to other people. I think men and women, we are a little bit different. Women get really excited about broad shoulders and things that mean he's strong enough to hold us, kind of thing. Men are looking at other kinds of things because they don't need our protection. So that some of that really bears in the way the genders are considering what's attractive.
And it's
That is
so
very
interesting. D'Anthony and I, we've talked about this previously. When you go back in history and look at the presidential elections, almost always the better looking candidate wins.
absolutely.
Like going back in our lifetimes, like to like Ronald Reagan and Walter
Yeah.
Mondale, Jimmy Carter, and Bill Clinton versus George Bush, Obama versus John McCain. The
Mm.
better looking, more youthful, vigorous looking candidate seems to win. So,
Yeah,
which in this election would obviously favor Kamala Harris. I mean, she's by far the more
I can't
youthful,
call this
energetic
one,
candidate.
Randall. I can't call this one.
No,
You're right. I cannot call it. Both of them have positive visual attributes. I cannot call this one.
Well, it depends, right? So if age is neutral, then they both have positive visual attributes. If age is not neutral,
Okay.
then there is clearly one that has an advantage. So it just really depends on how the American electorate is looking at age. And in our study, when we looked at it with men and women, and with just women, age was a negative predictor of how a voter was going to vote. So if
Really?
you have
Oh,
Yes.
wow.
So if you have a voter that appears to be not older, because not distinguished, because we got really we got good qualifiers and descriptors for things that we consider to be positive. But when you start using language like feeble and or fragile, that's when things start looking bad. Like when Elizabeth Warren was running, and they really made a big thing about her age as it related to her physical paralysis, those kinds of things. So it is age isn't neutral, and it is predictive of voting behavior. And if someone is viewed to be too old, it will be a negative predictor of voter behavior.
You
hmm.
found that in your female data. Is that correct, Robin?
Yeah, that's actually, I believe it's in both, but
Both?
men look at age from an aesthetic perspective.
Wow.
Now, Robin, a
Wow,
quick
wow,
follow up to
wow.
that, and D'Anthony, you might want to hop in here too.
Absolutely.
Probably the single biggest image in politics that we've seen recently was Trump getting shot and then emerging with blood on his face and his fist up in the air. Does that somehow negate the age thing? Because, I mean, to me, if you get shot in the head and you bounce back up and have your fist in the air, that tells me you're not in bad shape if you can do that.
I'm certainly not one that would say that I think Trump is in bad shape. So I'm not there. I think he clearly is a virile person of his age for sure. I think that's not exactly what I was alluding to. I was saying if age is a factor for the American population, and they were looking for someone who is most likely to have the increased stamina and follow through that is required for 4 years in the role of president, I believe it could very well be a negative for him.
That is
My
interesting.
thoughts, my thoughts were he couldn't have paid for a better PR situation. He got shot. He put his fist up. That the visual aesthetics of that says I'm a strong guy. I'm a tough guy. I'm the guy you should be voting for. And I don't think he could have paid for a better PR disaster or PR situation than that. And because of people want to identify with a male candidate, he got probably a lot of mileage out of that, Randall. The
Oh, yeah.
assassination, he got a lot of mileage out of that. And it
I don't
almost made
know. I
him look
mean, I think
invincible.
he got a bump in the polls right after, but
He
I
did.
don't think it's doing much for him right now, because at the end of the day, everyone's like, woo, they almost got him, but he's still here. What's he got to say? And then he comes back with the question like, okay, well, what exactly does that mean? You still, at some point have to put up policy. And you have to at some point come up with a plan that resonates with the populace in order for them to decide that not only did you make it through this conflict, but you should be the person to be in this role for the next 4 years. He's got to actually come forward with something.
I agree. I think I
I
still
I
think
agree. I agree completely with what both of you are saying. I think, and this is probably the biggest compliment I could pay to the Kamala Harris campaign, which is when Trump got shot and raised his fist in the air, had blood on his face. I was sitting there thinking like it's going to be really difficult for him to lose this election, because
Mm.
that is such a telling image. And the
yeah.
fact that she's basically in a dead heat right now in the polls with him, I think is a testament to how effectively her operation has been run because it's been flawless. Without it being flawless, we're never even in this spot.
She made
See,
a
and
statement,
I'm not
Randall,
even sure.
didn't she?
What
She made a
were you gonna
statement,
say?
right? I'm
No,
sorry.
not.
She made a
It wasn't
statement.
just her. It was everybody. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a master stroke of a move to make a statement against her opponent, meaning, hey man, this is way out of line shooting somebody. And that was a master
Absolutely.
stroke of genius for her strategy to do that. It
But it
made
wasn't
her,
just her, it was Biden, it was
yeah,
lots of our leaders. Our leaders
yes,
I would say as a whole came out in force that at no point in our history are we as American people looking to see such level of violence in our politics. Like this is
yes,
not who we are. And so everybody came out and said that, and that's why I said at the end of the day, most of the American population want the same thing. We want safe cities. We want
right.
well, we want opportunity for employment. We want good schools for our kids. We want good health care. We want to have good quality lives. We really want the same things. The question isn't that, it is just the other pieces in this arena that seem to polarize us over things that really aren't important. Because what's important is who's going to help us get the jobs? Who's going to help us stay safe? Who's going to make sure we have clean air to breathe? Who's going to make sure there's food on the shelf that I can go in and buy? Who's going to do that? That's what we should be focusing on, not whether or not we are going to put metal gates at the border. That a process that is already being ramped down. We are putting infrastructure in place. It's happening. I'm not sure what the right answer is, but I'm thinking spending $1 billion on gates when we got people that are homeless maybe isn't the best use of resources. It's just a thought. At the end of the day, if we would just speak about what our people need and see who's the best candidate, give us an opportunity to make a choice that is based on content. You know, I think
Interesting.
I think
American
all of
people
us
are
would love
smart enough.
that. Yeah, and DeAnthony and I have talked about this. I have this little 70-30 theory. I think 70% of Americans are somewhere towards the middle, whether it be center right, center left, or
Yeah.
dead middle. But they're exactly what you said. They want to live in peace. They have no intention of trying to start any kind of mess with anybody. And
Mm-hmm.
then you've got the 30%, 15% on one side and 15 on the other, who are
Mm-hmm.
all the ones starting all the mess.
Yes.
Mhm.
And the problem is, I think whether it's real or not, there's a perception that 15% control both political parties.
I think you have absolutely hit it on the head, Randall. And I think that's where Kamala Harris has decided she was going to use this joy factor, right? Because do we not all want to be happy? I mean,
It
we
seemed a
have to
lot like
be
hope and
here.
change.
Yeah. I mean, we
Yeah.
really are trying at the end of the day, everybody, it speaks to us all. Nobody wants to fight with your neighbor every day. Who wants to do that? Who wants to fight at work?
Yeah.
Who wants to fight on the way to work on the freeway? Like nobody wants this. We don't want to be fighting and at odds with each other all the time. It's a stress and a level of discontent that none of us signed up for.
Yes,
Yeah.
I agree. Yes. I want to
100%.
add something on that. And me and Randall talked about this on the last show. Um, is her political strategy is to reach everybody. She's going to have to differentiate herself from him because obviously he represents the conservative mindset. And I look at him and Randall, remember we talked about this. He looks like the cola and she looks like Pepsi, right?
Mhm.
and she
And I think she's like vanilla Coke. Okay. So I don't think she has to. I don't think she has
well,
to
I
do
mean,
that because
Pepsi, the new generation. That's Pepsi's
yeah,
slogan.
but I think vanilla Coke works well because what I think she doesn't have to differentiate herself. All she has to do is say, "I've done my job. My boss was great. Let me tell you what I'm going to do now." I think that's all she has to do. I don't think she doesn't have to come out with anything negative about him. We know who Joe Biden is. He's been in the political arena for multiple decades, a half a century. Nobody wonders
Yeah.
who is this man. We know who he is.
Yes.
She doesn't have to say anything. All she has to do is say, I did my job. I was loyal to the end. And look, I got a great recommendation from my boss. He liked my work. That's it. Now let me tell you what I want to do. That's it. She doesn't need to do anything else.
Agreed. Agreed.
Okay, you got me there. I agree. Yes, that's she's building off her position as VP, showing loyalty toward him, and that probably resonates with a lot of voters.
Oh,
Uh,
one question I got for both of you.
yes,
One of the biggest disappointments I had, just kind of as a moderate, is that both candidates did not pick someone who was more towards the center. They picked someone who
Mm.
was ideologically aligned with their
yeah,
party.
yeah, that
And
was pretty wild.
and for me, this election is going to come down to the 2 or 3% that are in the middle of these swing states.
Absolutely.
Why not pick a VP candidate that would appeal towards moderates?
See, and I'm not sure that I would agree about Watts because my when I look at him, he's a former teacher. He's somebody that served in the military. He has been in Congress. He's, you know, he's a governor. He really has had the opportunity and the track record to unify people from all different walks of life. You don't get the kind of jobs that he has and then be so to one side or the other that you can't find common ground. He is clearly expert at this. So I understand that he is not somebody we would say is a marked moderate. However, he has boatloads of experience bringing the parties together. And I think we need somebody to help us come together. We're so far apart for things that really don't matter because we really just want a good life. We really just want those things that we already talked about, Randall. We don't need to be arguing and fighting and calling the police on each other. Like, what are we doing? This is not who America is. We may have had some struggles in our past. We got lots of things that we have needed to overcome. But who are we going to be going forward? I want to believe that we can come together, and I think we got a pack. We got people that can do that. Now, JD Vance, I'm not sure what his background is on that, the ability to bring people together, but I don't think Trump spent much
He's
time
Trump
thinking about
Jr.
that.
He's
Is he?
Trump
Yeah,
Jr.
I don't
I
think
don't
I
know
he's
mean,
much
Trump.
about him.
Yeah,
that's the problem. I think Trump wanted a loyal lieutenant,
yeah, he
um,
got that.
and I think he got that.
Hmm.
My issue with Walls, and I know a lot of people have said in the media, how he handled the protests and all that. That wasn't even my biggest issue as a moderate. My biggest issue was some of the comments he's made in the past. Now, whether or not they were in jest, like, one man's socialism is another man's neighborliness, or things like the lockdowns with COVID. Minnesota was locked down. It was one of the more hardcore lockdown states.
Right.
And, these are things that, kind of just was one of those things where I don't put him in that moderate category mainly because of these things. I don't put
That
either.
makes sense.
And this was a criticism of both VPs. I
You know,
mean,
all of those points that makes a lot of sense. I can understand that. I can say this: the one thing about it is, unfortunately, this life that we lead and even the roles that we take is a form of experimentation. There's some things that work and there's some things that don't work. And the question isn't whether or not we have engaged in activities that may have been better if we had done something different. The question is, did we learn anything? And so that's really the question. We see you over there with the COVID. We saw you when you did so and so. What did you take from that? That would be the conversation I'd like to have with him, because I'm more concerned about people who don't learn anything from their life experiences, because it means if you didn't learn, you will, and given the same opportunity, you're going to do the same exact thing even though it didn't work.
Yeah, and that's what I would love to hear from either candidate. I would love to hear that. If I had to do it all over again, this is what I would have done differently.
Yes, that's what I would like
And
to hear as
for
well.
Trump, I think the biggest thing with him, his approval rating going into COVID was in the 60s.
Oh,
And
wow.
then all of a sudden COVID happened. And the one thing he's never done is just say, hey, look, there's so many things I wish I had to do over. We weren't prepared
Yes,
for this.
absolutely.
And
Because
just
that
own
is
it, because
that is the truth.
own it, own
Yes.
your mistakes,
But
rather than saying
it
all the things he did,
but it
like the vaccine and all that. I don't
absolutely.
want to hear about that.
But
Tell
it
me
belies
everything
a
you did wrong.
but it belies a character thing, because at the end of the day, a good leader is one that is reflexive enough that they can own their mistakes and come up with a plan to improve them. It isn't just doing the things, it is being able to learn from the experiences. And I think that's why when we're looking at this presidential election, when we look at this data, that is why when we were looking at the women voters in particular, they're interested in the content. They want to make sure there's fidelity between what somebody says and what they do. They want to make sure that if you say you're a person of moral turpitude and value, do you operate that way? Is that the way you speak to people? Is that the way you operate in your choices in your own life? They're looking to see if there is fidelity. And if there isn't, there should be some accountability. Somebody should say something. You know what? I departed from my belief system. I have to apologize to you. This is what was going on. Now, this is what I would like to do in the future. I think that's reasonable. We're not
Yeah,
expecting
I would love that.
perfection. Yeah.
And I would
Interesting.
love to hear that from Walls regarding the lockdowns too. Would he do it all over again? I think these
Yes.
are all great questions to ask.
Yes. But see, but those questions aren't the same as a conviction. See, because at the end of the day, we've gotten away from believing that conversation can resolve problems, but it really can. So
Yeah.
what we need to be able to do is say, hey, we would love to see some questions being brought in by the general public at these debates. There are some things we're really interested in talking about. We
Yeah.
really would like the answers to. We would like to see who you are as a human, not as a political machine. Who are you?
Mm-hmm. Agree
Interesting.
completely.
Mhm.
Interesting. I can't
So,
wait to see the VP debate. That's going to be really interesting.
yeah, and I definitely after the debate want to circle back with this conversation. This
Yeah,
is
Oh, yes, absolutely.
D'Anthony, I completely agree with you. I think if you call this right now and say so and so is going to win,
I could have done that probably the last 4 years. I cannot call this one. And Robin is really
no.
muddying up
I
the
mean, I would
waters.
love to collect some more data. I would love to collect some data right now on how people feel, if they're feeling hopeful. Because see, I'm curious about what she's trying to do, and I'm
Yeah,
looking at what Trump is trying to do. I'm curious to know whose philosophy is gaining the momentum, because that, right, like you said, in the polls they look pretty neck and neck within the margin of error. I know that she has caught up, but my question is, who's going to get across the finish line? So that's what I'm really curious to know, because those campaigns that have been successful in the past, that were outsiders or were people that no one thought could possibly win, did so because they created a synergy and an energy around their philosophy about what would happen tomorrow that people invested in. So I'm super curious about, are we invested in whose philosophy? That's going to tell us who wins.
That is
yeah,
so great.
absolutely.
Well, thank you both for your time. I'm going to stop the recording.
Thank you.
Perfect.